There are many, many questions, and I will not be able to get to all of them. So what I'd like to do, I've grouped them. And so perhaps I can ask a couple of questions at one time. Some of this you've kind of responded to, so maybe we don't need to go back into it. And we don't need everybody responding to every question. So if somebody answers it, you know, we can kind of move on to the next one. So that would be wonderful, okay? So the first group of questions is a little bit more specific about the problems in Alameda. I'm gonna run through these, but I think you'll be able to handle it at, you know, the different levels. They're all in the same general category. So the first question is about the Alameda Police Department, and if they are actively monitoring specific hotels and motels on Webster Street. The Islander is mentioned, but the Islander is closed now, I understand. But, and I want to say something very serious here, so please listen. This person says in her question, "It was easy to sell me under everyone's nose. Seemed no one noticed. Please have more special training." So that is, speaks for itself. So on that same level about training, the questions are similar. Do the Oakland police have enough staff? So this was Alameda and Oakland. Do they have enough? I think you've answered this one, but how big a problem is domestic slavery in Alameda County, so overall in the county? Are there sufficient federal laws to address the wrongdoers? So this is about staff and laws and what we are trying to do. Does the Salvation Army respond and care for any of these folks? So maybe I'll stop there, kind of just open it up for the panel. And Mrs. Saya, maybe you can start with us or pick it up. Anyone can pick up any of these, so just jump on in.
You know, I'll be happy to. I'll obviously reserve the questions about specifically what's happening in Alameda County to the experts here in Alameda County. I will say, though, that as to the question about is there enough training, the answer is there's never enough, right? I mean, there's never enough because there is an insatiable demand. I mean, Nancy was referring to this before for human trafficking right now, for that exploitation. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and that was kind of seeing that poignant note that was written here tonight, tells us a lot, I think, about what is important is that whether we're talking about our first responders, we're talking about folks that are sitting here in the room who are at that grocery store, who see something odd going on, or anything in between, that it's very important that everyone kind of take that responsibility to, in a very real way, think of themselves as those first responders. And that's the reason why that a lot of our state agencies are spending a lot more of the resources that we have available to be able to dedicate towards training. We are in the midst right now of preparing a partnership that we want to, through the Attorney General's office, to partner together with the 4 United States attorneys in the state of California to be able to develop more training for responders who are on the federal and the state and the local side, to be able to really kind of go to the point that was raised a moment ago. And then on the issue of federal law, I'll just say, just kind of from my own experience, that there are, among other things, there are very robust federal laws on the books that criminalize sex trafficking in particular, that are quite effective, and that's the reason why that often in particular jurisdictions around the country that don't have as aggressive systems in state law to punish and prosecute these perpetrators, federal law has the opportunity to step in and really put away a lot of these folks for a long period of time. The one functionality that you have in federal law that's quite effective is that you have something called mandatory minimum sentences for certain types of crimes. And in the case of sex trafficking, one of the laws that exists is, and these are kind of laws that I would prosecute because they were just such strong hammers, is that for certain crimes involving sex trafficking in which the government can prove that the sex trafficking victims themselves were under a certain age, and really it's the age of minority, so that's under the age of 18, then the mandatory minimum sentence was anywhere from, was 15 years or higher. And that's 15 years in a federal prison, which, as y'all may know, and I hope actually maybe y'all don't, because it means that you've not been in the criminal justice system. In the federal system, parole has been abolished, which means that if you serve time in federal prison, you serve all of that time. And that's a pretty big hammer. So the issue of the answer to the question on federal law is there are very strong laws, but again, in California, and also it means we have to have strong district attorneys. In California, we also have strong state laws because state and locals play a very important role in eradicating this crime too.
So a year ago in 2012, yes, in November 2012, California passed an initiative which was Proposition 35, that created the strongest laws and punishments for traffickers, much alike in par with what the federal government has. And so if it's sex trafficking and it's a person under a certain age, then it's 15 years. Some can be life terms, depending on what else happens in addition to the trafficking. This initiative was passed by the greatest margin ever in the history of the initiative process in California. That's how much the community gets what's going on. And we weren't as successful with our legislators for various reasons, but we took it to the voters and we were able to pass that. It also provides a fund, the creation of a fund for when victims of trafficking are rescued. And we have resources that we can provide. The federal government, we're really working so closely with them to increase the resources through the Office of Violence Against Women, through the Office of Juvenile Justice Planning, to try to increase the resources that are available for after when a child is rescued or a victim is rescued. And the federal government has given us quite a bit in terms of what we can do on behalf of an adult victim of trafficking, the labor or sex trafficking, who is an immigrant brought to this country and forced into and has been trafficked, and our ability to at least provide resources for a limited period of time so that they have a way to live beyond that. The Alameda County has been identified, and particularly the Bay Area and particularly Oakland, identified as one of the hotspots in the country. We are now getting ready for the Super Bowl, which is coming to Santa Clara County. And what we do know is that whenever there are big events like that, that we oftentimes are going to find women and children and boys and men who are being forced into the commercial sex world for the demand. And again, this is another reason why we're really giving a lot of focus. But I want to ask Maya to talk a little bit about the demographics of who we're seeing here in Alameda County.
Good.
And that really responds to, thank you, Nancy. That really responds to really getting an understanding of what Alameda County's problem is around C-sex. So nationally, the FBI actually ranked and pinpointed that the SF Bay Area, particularly Oakland, is a hotspot, one of the top 13 hotspots for child sex trafficking in the nation. And that's something that is really felt in our community. And through Safety Net, we've been able to really, as Nancy mentioned, really been able to understand what this demographic looks like. But what's really interesting is that we also found that 65% of the clients that were referred to us actually are not from Alameda County, or even from Oakland. Oakland does have the largest population of clients that were referred, but really a lot of them are coming from Sacramento, some from Portland, some from other states even, and a lot from LA. And so that really just goes to show that the traffickers, the pimps, they're bringing their girls here. They're bringing their boys, boy trafficking operates a little bit differently, but they're bringing their victims here because they know that there's a market for it here. And there's a lot of law enforcement officer agencies like OPD and Alameda County PD and our office under DA Nancy's leadership that's really targeting this response, but the traffickers know that the demand is here, so they keep bringing them here.
The last thing I want to say is that Alameda PD has been very involved in training in the last couple of years. One of our initiatives is law enforcement training, which I talked about. We have a quarterly meeting with about over 100 people that come, mostly law enforcement, but also victim advocates. And Alameda was one of the first departments to participate in our training. And I think almost everyone on the police department has been trained in recognizing trafficking and what is an appropriate response to that.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you so much. So on another kind of category, there were several questions about culture, how culture plays a role in human trafficking. So let me just kind of run through some of these. You'll get the flair of what these are about. In what way, one person asks, could this problem be addressed from a cultural standpoint? $100,000 a year per sex traffic victim implies that there is a great demand for illicit sex, and this possibly is a serious problem on a broader social scale. How does that all relate? Is anyone discussing the legislation and open regulation of prostitution as a means of devaluing this unjust commodity? Similarly, another person asks, what cultural and social values in the larger culture reinforce trafficking and sexual exploitation? How can we change this? Another, isn't human trafficking a symptom of our male-dominated misogynistic culture? And I bet that was a guy that wrote that.
We'll let Jeff answer that one.
And finally, just in this kind of category, what is the ethical, social breakdown of victims of trafficking? How many illegals and legals? This kind of ethics background. I don't know, cultural background. Who are they?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'll follow it.
So really I want to begin by addressing, and then I'll hand it off, but I want to begin by addressing what are sort of the factors that might perpetuate child sex trafficking or human trafficking in general. And what's known is that obviously poverty plays a really big role, or income inequalities plays a huge role. But we're also finding broadly for societal reasons, it's actually pop culture, the media, and that's something that actually we're going to be bringing up in our third episode of He Watch Radio, where we're talking to the likes of, I don't know if some of you have heard, Gene Kilborn, who created Killing Us Softly, to really address how the media over-sexualizes and objectifies women and children, and then as a result ends up using exploitative and controlling mechanisms similar to what we see in human trafficking. And that's one of the really biggest factors that is part of what contributes to human trafficking here in our community. And I don't know if anyone else wants to. Sure. So some of the racial and ethnic backgrounds of this population, because of the demographics of the Bay Area, and I can really only speak to the Bay Area, we're really finding, yes, there's a lot more African American victims here, and then Latino and some API, Asian Pacific Islanders. But there's also a large Caucasian faction of victims. They range from all different classes. So we do have, a lot of them that, yes, as I mentioned before, come from low-income communities. But there are cases where, these are victims that actually came from loving homes that were also were from the middle class or even the upper class. Just to put it that way. But then if you're looking at just sort of broadly human trafficking, if we're talking about undocumented or documented victims, I'm not really sure how, what are the exact demographics, but I do know that, they definitely are a greater risk depending on what communities they come from. One of the biggest cases that came out of our county was actually the Lucky Reddy case out of Berkeley. And how many of you have heard of this case? It's okay. So that's what I thought. So actually this case was discovered actually by high school students from Berkeley High who would always go to this one restaurant. And this was in downtown Berkeley. And as a student in Cal, I would always actually, visit that area, but I didn't realize that was the restaurant. And what was happening was the owner of this restaurant, who was also a property owner of a lot of different apartment complexes here in our county, he would actually get victims from his own community in India and who were very poor and very reliant on him, and he would bring them here. And he exerted so much control over the community that even though the parents knew that this was going on in America, they still would not say anything because even though he was actually living here in America, he exerted so much control over what would happen to their family members that the victims, out of fear, force, fear, and coercion, would comply, and their parents, out of necessity of, financial necessity, would comply, and also fear of what he would do to them or their child. So that's one of the examples of what we're seeing with the demographics and how it happens, with how control happens.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing in regards to foreign-born survivors of human trafficking and what we are seeing working with them. We do see, like Maya said, the majority of them are coming from the Latino community, followed by, Asian Pacific Islander and also South Asian communities. One thing that we have seen as vulnerability factors for foreign-born individuals being trafficked is not only poverty, but also individuals coming from certain parts of the world that has civil unrest or wars going on. They become more vulnerable. Or also when there is a natural disaster. When Haiti happened, we had a couple of cases that came up of that as well. So we also see other factors that will bring somebody to migrate. But one trend that I really wanted to point it out is that we see a lot of individuals that are coming with working visa, with H-1B working visas. They are not coming undocumented. They are not coming, through the border. They're actually coming with valid visas. And once they get here, the trafficker will withhold their documents, withhold that immigration status on their heads, and maintain control over them. So it's not something that would be only, when we are talking about foreign-born trafficking, it's not only undocumented, but we also have a lot of workers that come in on valid working visas and are exploited. Specifically, a big example of that is within the Filipino community. We have a lot of individuals that will come to work at the nursing homes, and then once they are here, they're then exploited and held against their will. Or they take their documents away. And if there is also the wage portion as well, even though they're working around the clock, never getting overtime, have the immigration holding over them, have their documents away from them. And because they are getting that $50 that might go a long way, or that $100 that might go away back home, that's also something is better than nothing. So it's very important to have services available for them so they can leave the situation and still provide for their families.
Yes.
Yeah, just to connect it to what labor is doing within this area, not as, in a deep way that a lot of the folks are here and talking with people directly. We have found where we have our labor unions that have relationships with our community organizations, that's how we really get informed about what's going out there. So I'll use an example. Asian Health Services is a community-based clinic which serves about up to 50,000 clients and patients in Alameda County, but it's based in Oakland and Chinatown. And so what happens is that they have, unlike a number of community-based organizations, especially around healthcare, they have a part of their organization that does outreach around, AIDS education, sexually transmitted diseases, but also they were finding that a number of the Asian girls, in particular Cambodians, were being subjected to the sexual exploitation of minors. And so there is a community organization, cultural organization on International Boulevard, we call East 14th, called East Bay, what is it called? It's a cultural, it's the cultural organization. Anyway, they have a lot of festivals, during the summer, San Antonio Park in that area. East Side something. Anyway, my husband and I went because Victor is on the Asian Health Services Board, and one of their folks that headed up that component of the program dealing with the girls said, come, there's going to be a video. It's a fundraiser, for raising funds for these girls that have come together, and they're trying to educate them, get them organized, to stay away from that life. So we went there, and culture does have a lot to do with it, because a lot of the young girls that were there, you know, when people come from another country like Cambodia and then come here, it's a cultural shock. You know, you don't speak the language, you don't know how to access resources that are there, and there's a big gap. You know, the children then start wanting to be more independent and not speaking their native language. And so what they were telling me was that there would be an older, you know, one of the girls in the family, an older daughter, has a boyfriend. Then the boyfriend starts checking out the younger sister, and then begins to get them kind of pulled into that world. And it's really something that, you know, these predators and these perpetrators, they see fair game, you know, and if the parents are always working because they are really struggling to make ends meet, they're not there to kind of oversee what's going on. So a lot of times it is, from what we've seen from our just, you know, interaction with the community, that happens. The other thing is with day laborers. You probably see day laborers, they're usually, you know, Guatemalan. Well, the organization they have, which is based in Oakland, it's called the Oakland Workers Collective, is actually affiliated with our Labor Council. So why are we having people who are not in unions join the Labor Council? Well, the reason is this, is because we feel that every single person, no matter where you come from, if you're trying to earn a decent living to take care of yourselves and your families, you should be able to work with us. They have organized themselves because some of the things that they reported, people would refer to them as like walking ATMs, because they get cash. You go on the corner, you go and paint someone's house or pick up trash or whatever. And, you know, some folks are good. They say, yeah, you know, you come and do that work, we'll pay you for it. Well, there are too many people that abuse that. What they say is, we're not going to pay you anything. If you don't have documents, we're going to report you. What can they do? The other thing that they're finding is, and one of the workers was telling us this at a delegates meeting, is that now they have flyers and starting to ask them to get on these sexual explicit websites. I forgot to tell you about that, Nancy, but this is something that they're experiencing because people know that they're vulnerable, and they want to work, but folks don't want to do that for a living. You know, so I would really be happy to say that if there were trainings, you know, like how do you recognize something, what do you do about it, just on a very grassroots level. I know that my affiliates would really appreciate that, and I really have to take my hats off to the courageous person who said, I'm invisible and nobody sees this going on, as a testament to the fact that that person has the courage to come here and know that you're not alone, that we are here because we want to be educated, we want to be informed, and we want to do something about it, because this cannot continue. And the only way that we can deal with it is be the eyes and ears, and frankly, not depend on the police, because the police can't do everything.
And actually, do you mind if I say the National Human Trafficking Hotline for anyone who does want to report a case so they can get connected to us? It's 1-888-3737-888, and that goes to the Polaris Project National Hotline.
But on the very subject of kind of things not working as well as they could, and perhaps some changes could be made, the question was, have any traffickers been caught through bank accounts? Have any traffickers been caught through the airlines? We understood that some airlines were starting to watch people coming in from Southeast Asia and, you know, seeing if there's anything there. And then kind of along with that, trying to put some of this together, is the lack of support for kids that are aging out of foster care. Does that contribute to pushing some of them into prostitution? So those two, if you can
I'll
touch
be really
on that.
brief.
Thank you.
The county particularly has started and is continuing a lot of initiatives for kids that are transitioning out of foster care, not the least of which is we have a fellowship program through the county where kids from coming out of foster care will come work for the county. And we're training them with life skills, job skills, and they spend about 9 months with us, and then they're job ready. So there's a lot going on. And also the law changed to extend the benefits for children coming out of foster care, so at 18 they don't get pushed out some door. We do look at bank accounts. We seize everything we can get our hands on. And I know that through the Attorney General's office that they have joined forces and brought to us, meaning us at the local level, the incredible resources through technology that are going to allow us to really find the money. And my husband lives his life by the Godfather movie, so he will always say, "Where's the money?" and find it, and we do. I actually now have 2 forensic auditors who work on my staff just looking for money, not just in the sex industry and the sex trafficking, but also in the labor trafficking. Because once we can access that money, we can put it back to in the pockets of the victims of trafficking. And then the third thing that you said was banks and trafficking.
And airlines.
Oh, so I told you we're getting ready for the Super Bowl. An organization we're working with, Sage is also working with them, have done training at San Francisco with the TSA workers, and next month we're doing training with at the Oakland airport with TSA workers and people like that to start, so they can start recognizing. One of my staff went over to Hawaii with a group to teach the people in Hawaii about human trafficking, and there were Oakland girls on the track, that's what they call it, Oakland girls on the track in Hawaii. Some of those kids have no idea how they got there. I mean, they have no idea. No IDs. I mean, you just have to wonder. So we're doing a lot of training now to make sure that not just the airlines, but hotels and motels are aware of what to look for so that we can, and then we rely on them, and sometimes it's with a big stick, to report what they're saying that's out of whack. The last thing, Jeff Sy had mentioned about 1193, which the Attorney General was instrumental. This is SB 1193. On the beginning of April, as of April 1, there are any business doing in California that meets one of the criteria, massage parlors, liquor stores, hotel, motels, they are required by law to post the poster that has all this information, and not the least of which is a hotline number about human trafficking. We've designed the poster that is being used throughout the state, and I know the Attorney General's office has also made it available to the rest of the state. The fines are huge. So the first day that these businesses don't post, it's $500 fine. It's like $2,000 a day after that. So there's a big financial incentive to comply with the law. And that we will have a day of action where we're going to all the businesses in all of our cities and say, here's the poster.
That is April 5th here in Alameda.
Yes.
And we have been asked as the League to help organize the April 5th day here on human trafficking. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll start getting out some flyers to our members, start getting some publicity on the next step. Where are we going with all this? So April 5th, and it's many of your groups, I think, are involved in that.
And there's actually a website to find out more information. So you can go to Back to Freedom, BAHC for Bay Area Heat Coalition, BAHC, the number 2, freedom.org. And on that website, we have partners that we're partnering with. The whole Bay Area on April 5th is going to go out to businesses with this poster and knock on their doors.
So we are at 5-2. There are some good questions here I didn't get to, but what I'd like to kind of ask each of you to maybe respond to as best you can is we've certainly talked about the problems. We've talked about the problems of human trafficking, both sexually and labor, work-wise. And I'd like you each to perhaps give, since there's so much going on by so many organizations, and there seems to be not one person in this room, I bet, supports human trafficking. Am I right about that? So politically speaking, I would say that the politicians shouldn't have a big problem in moving things forward. So could I have each of you respond to what you think would be the best way the League or we the people can get rid of this problem? We should be able to get rid of it. And so can we start right here? I'll put you right on the spot.
You can.
1 minute each.
Well, gosh, I'll try to do that. I've never been able to do that. You know, the point I'll make is this, and it almost is that last comment that you made, which is one of the reasons why this problem has been so intractable on so many levels from a political standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, is because the very people we're talking about are almost by definition voiceless. They're not voters because a lot of them are underage. They're not necessarily American, although those numbers suggest that itself is increasing. And I think that's exactly where groups like the League of Women Voters, that folks like y'all, really play an important part, because it is giving voice to those voiceless. And it's just sitting here listening to these folks and then the leadership of Nancy, it's really pretty inspiring, because this is, I think, what's necessary to try to really raise the consciousness of people, to increase their awareness about the problem itself, and to also work to try to make sure that there is that kind of representation, whether it is in court or whether it's on the street and trying to identify the problem.
Been about a minute.
No, sorry. I think that's how we do it.
Okay,
Sorry.
just write down one, if you can do it in 1 minute, that'd be great.
All right. So I just want, we've shared a lot of bad stories of what those survivors go through. And one of the most common questions that my friends, or when I first acquaint somebody, they ask me, how can you do this? How can you, every day go to work and hear those horrible stories? But the thing that stick the most with me is the resilience, is how resilient each survivor is to get back together, to help their family, to help themselves once they had the opportunity to process the trauma that they're gone through, and they feel empowered enough. Is amazing the things that they are able to accomplish. So what I wanted to ask the community is to take a second look of communities or people that you normally consider as criminals, or just take a second look, or undocumented work. And also you can volunteer, you can raise awareness like I mentioned before. We can go to your community and provide training, and also donations as well, because we do need funding to continue to provide this work to survivors.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Echo what both have just said. I will say that for me, we've seen so many people coming out of being trafficked who have gone on to really have a voice, and a strong voice. So my plea to you is continue to talk about it. The more people understand, the more people are aware, the stronger we'll be when we go to the legislature to change the laws. We have to change our laws to address the demand. We're way too light, and I have a really quick story about messaging. We never call our children prostitutes. They are prostituted and victims. I don't call exploiters pimps anymore, because that's not that bad of a word. There's even a show called Pimp My Car or something like that. So we call exploiters or traffickers. And the last thing I'll say is, I never use the term John, because I'm married to a guy named John, and he's a nice guy. And Marilyn knows. But really, I looked it up, and John was used when women did want to detract from police looking at them while they were waiting to engage in commercial sex. It's too nice a word, so we need to make our laws tougher against that demand and stop using terms that get them off the hook for the despicable work that they're doing.
Yeah, that was another one of the questions. Isn't human trafficking a little too nice? Go ahead.
So short and sweet, just join us on April 5th. You can go to backtofreedom.org. You can also contact us at info@heat-watch.org, and we'd love to see you there on April 5th.
And say the number one more time.
Oh, and the number is for the hotline is 1-888-373-7888. You can call for information, but also to report human trafficking.
Thank you. One final comment.
And very quickly, be informed, educated, take action, and check out the Family Justice Center. Thank you.
Thank you all. I want to thank you all for coming. Kate Quick, co-president, we're a team here, has a few words for you, but really few. And thank you all for your really good questions. It's been a great
And I do thank all of you. I think this is one of the best panels that we have ever had. I know we're supposed to do a chant.
Gonna put that in our newsletter. Every time I hear you, Nancy, it's like I feel like I'm just like learning so much. I have some everything. Oh my God. This is great. I didn't even know